Here we go again. Welcome back to another round of the Crazyhouse Team League. This time we have a match between LegionDestroyer playing the white pieces in the first game of the mini match versus CrazyHome again. So just stepping back to the start, we have e4, d5, e takes, e6, bishop b5 check, d takes, b takes, and bishop e2, e5, knight c3. So it's a real gambit this time. I think against me, CrazyHome played c6 and I let him take back on d5. So white here is a pawn ahead and bishop c5. So we're up to the current position, white to play. And because this is a board 1 match, it is 5+5. And I believe there is also another match going on at the same time between Chronatog and grogers. A little bit hard because the windows aren't set up to follow 2 games at once. And I was watching the other 2 just a second ago, but because Chronatog moves instantly, it's making a lot of sound from the other board, so I'd rather just focus on 1 game at a time. So knight e4, just attacking and preventing any sacks for the moment on f2. I'm rather unfamiliar with this position after knight e4. I would have assumed just knight f3 would be the main move after bishop c5 and let them sack on f2 if he wants to. So quite a bit of time being taken here in the opening. I guess the main choices are just bishop b6 or bishop back to e7. But CrazyHome is another very fast player, so I'm a bit surprised he's taking so much time on move number 7. I think the pressure here is all on black to prove that the pawn sacrifice is worthwhile and you can create some play out of it. I noticed both Jan and Master 10 in a recent game played bishop c4. I don't quite understand the idea of bishop c4. Inviting black to drop a pawn with tempo on d5. But in the first match I was referring to is Jan versus Jasugi. And Jasugi in just about every game was answering bishop a6. Or at some point there was a bishop a6. And then they traded on a6, and either on the next move or the move after, the bishop dropped back on b7. But this is a completely different animal. This opening here, knight e4, bishop e7, knight f3, and pawn at d5. So still gaining a tempo, but this time on the knight rather than the white bishop. So where's the knight going back to? g3, h5. Black still has to defend the pawn on e5. No, we see a surprise. What's this pawn at d6? What's the idea of this? So Legion has given the pawn back in order to quickly play d4. I suppose the idea is he doesn't have to take back immediately on d4. There are other moves. For instance, bishop at e5. Answering check with bishop d2, and there's a big target there on g7. And the bishop on e2 here actually helps stop the pin. So after bishop at e5, queen e7 is not a pin on the e-file, on the e5 bishop. So CrazyHome rather has defended rather than take on d4, so pawn at f6. It's a little unclear what he's going to do with his knight on g8. So a very sensible move, bishop at g3, just preparing the way to castle, and also keeping the target here on e5, so 3 pieces piling up an attack. Pawn at c5. This will be useful if white can generate a lot of trades and then stick a piece back on d6. Or c7, so he's going for c7, so once the queen steps back, then there'll be a knight takes e5 and a knight trade. And a knight at c7 is the plan. So the queen, you notice, is stepping away from a potential fork on c7. I wonder if you could still take it here anyway. Trade the knight, knight at c7, pick up the rook. The counter-attack looks a bit slow. It'd have to involve knight at h4, but it will take an extra move to go anywhere. In the meantime, white will have a rook in hand. Could even just defend the threat on g2 in that case. So just looking at knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, knight at c7, king say f8, knight takes rook, and then black will have a knight in hand for h4. Perhaps white could just ignore it and go rook at d8. Check. Actually, black would be left with no piece blockers in that case. Or would he still have a knight? He would still have a knight. Because he already has one, there'll be another trade here. Actually, I have a bishop too. And then white can just clean up on c8. Alright, so if knight takes e5 is not looking so great. Well, what option is there for black? You can see he's down to 1 minute 40 already. So big threat here, knight takes d7 followed by knight at c7 check. How do you defend? Legion's done very well to have this little pawn invasion on c5 and d6. So it is the line I've been anticipating with knight at c7 check. But I think black is going to have to stop rook at d8 check. I mean, it does involve a lot of piece sacrifices if you try to counterattack with knight at h4. And how does he defend the square g8? Maybe with a check, bishop at a5 check. There is also bishop at h4 check. Ah, okay, so he's trying to clean up the base of the pawn chain with a check. If takes here, it still allows rook at d8 check. So this doesn't deal with the threat to win a piece on c8. Probably just rook takes c8, I'd be expecting. I wouldn't be afraid of a sack on f2 with only one black knight in hand. Knight at e4, king f1 and so on. Alright, but he's gone for the threat of... there's actually a sneaky threat of pawn at e7. That would force black to sack the queen because otherwise it's mate. I don't think this attack is going anywhere for CrazyHome. Sveta says check. Where's check? There's been a few checks in this game so far. Bishop f2, king f1. Knight f6, just pawn at e7. This is game over, this is 1-0. Yeah, Sveta could be mate in 7. Could even be a faster mate now. But I guess black can give up a few pieces. What was this? Yeah, sacking the queen and king takes e7. So there's no mate, the knight covers the mate, so black is just cleaning up another piece with the threat of queen at d8 check. Just rook takes c7. Could even take the rook here if you want. No counter-attack in sight. In fact, what would you need to counter-attack? You'd probably need an extra knight and a queen for knight at g3, knight at h2. And then another knight back on g4 and queen at f2. Black is a few pieces short. A few pieces short of a six-pack, we say in Australia. Yeah, laggy, but it's a team league match, so Sveta, I'm sure we've talked about that before. The players could potentially be stream sniping, even though I'm not the one playing. So bishop at d8, what's the idea here? Just to clear the square f8 for a major piece. And then there's bound to be a mate turning up anytime soon. Maybe a rook at d6, king f5. Bishop g4 first, that's a better way to do it. So bringing out the queen, otherwise it's just rook at, rook at e7. I was going to say rook out of the way and then queen e7 to finish, but I think it might have been a little faster. Knight at b7. There's a mate in one. Oh, not predicting the moves. Knight at b7. Come on, Legion, I gotta go to bed. Could even check out the other game now that these players are missing mates in one. Where is the other game? It's Chronatog versus G. Rogers. Knight at b7 check. Okay, it's a little late for mate in one. Queen b3. King a6 forced, and I hope he's not going to go knight c4. Actually, it is going to be made in a few after bishop takes queen c8. Does anyone see another way to mate? He's done it. Knight c5, bishop takes queen c8, king a5, bishop takes c7 check. And I guess he wants to go knight at b7 again, so second time lucky. Pawn at b4 is also possible. Alright, but that's really it this time. It's made in two. Knight c5, queen a6. Okay, so game 1 to LegionDestroyer, pretty comfortable. I think once he got those pawns on c5 and d6, it was too hard for CrazyHome to defend. Best chance may have been bishop at a5 with a check, or bishop at h4. I think he had to stop rook at d8. But what do we have here? This is the Vectorveld opening. So let me just have a look. The bishop sack was very early on move number 3. Hello, Katask. Bishop sack was on move number 3. But otherwise, really, we seem to have been following my match against Vectorveld, and also Legion's match against Vectorveld. But Vectorveld sacked another piece with d4, whereas CrazyHome has brought the knight back to f3. And no, so there was not pawn at e3 in this game. So the Vectorveld game went pawn at e3 and then knight takes c2 check. So black's still a piece up for a pawn. And you'd think black should counterattack on the queen somehow. Maybe bishop 2. Actually, bishop at g4 looks a bit more accurate. Otherwise, there'll be a knight at e6 at some point. So no need to trade the pawns. Just go bishop at g4. E takes f6. You even have a choice there to go bishop takes if you don't like pawn takes g7 check, for instance. But allowing fe and then you have a queen takes e7 check in response seems okay for black. Allowing fg, king takes g7. You see how the bishop covers h5 and f5. And then gf, you'd have to watch out for a knight check the following turn, but the material imbalance still would have been a queen for a piece. Well, this is a safer way in case he wasn't sure about fg7 check. So now black just has to decide how to harass the queen. Should he go knight at f5 or knight at h4 first and try and provoke rook g1 and then maybe the knight back to f5? No, a different move, pawn at b4. So what's the idea of this? Is the knight so badly placed on e4? Knight e4, knight at f5. I'm anticipating knight at f5. No, queen e7. Seems like the queen on e7 is immune to the knight drops. So yeah, eventually we have it, knight at f5. And that also does highlight the weakness on d4. So you would think, well, you still got to look at knight takes d4, knight takes f6 in response. But then there's knight e2 check and knight takes f4. And the knight on f6 can't build any sort of attack using the other pieces in hand. So was knight e2 missed? I didn't see a good result. I mean, those are tricky. Knight takes h7. You could even just sidestep king e8 in response to knight takes h7 check, so you don't fall for the fork on with knight at g6. So g takes f6, the safer way, or maybe he just missed the sequence I was talking about. It still looks good for black. So the knight is immune to the same trick with knight at e2. And that's why he's not taking back with the queen and trading queens. Even that probably isn't too bad. So CrazyHome giving the queen because he didn't want a retreat, I guess. Still, this queen is looking very safe from all the minor pieces. And black really wants to play bishop h3 on the next move. And just to keep hitting the light squares, especially g2. So rook a e1. Could he play bishop h3 anyway? I think I would do it without too much thought. Bishop takes g7, queen g7 looks fine. So bishop h3, what's the defense? Perhaps knight at f4? And is it worthwhile sacking on g2 and then putting something back? Or just bishop h3? But white still has two knights in hand, so the knight is not really the piece that black needs right now. So you could trade a bishop for a knight or a pawn at f3, but eventually white will have enough knights to hold this position in the short term. So knight to f4, you could still throw in bishop h3, but he's threatening bishop at g2 this way. Oh, hang on, you can't allow knight at g6 check. And that was also a problem with bishop h3, so this is a sneaky threat missed by Legion. And this suddenly turns the tables. So it would have been a lot simpler to block somewhere on the e-file rather than trying all these tricky attacking moves, because knight at f4 was no mere defensive move. Rook takes e7 now comes with a check, and that is a deadly check after rook takes and knight takes h8. So this should be game over, 1-0. Just way too many pieces in hand for white. And Legion might even resign this in disgust, because he had a lot of time, 4 minutes, and that was plenty of time to have a good think about whether it was safe to play moves like bishop h3 or to take the bishop back on h6. So what he missed was that he was losing the queen with check, whichever way he stepped with the king, either king g8, then there was knight takes e7 check, or king anywhere on the 7th rank, followed by rook takes e7 check. So now the problem, of course, is that every move comes with check. And look at this slew of pieces. There'll be a queen and a rook and 3 bishops, knight, 2 pawns. And CrazyHome probably only needs half of that to finish. So it looks like the other match, Chronatog and G. Rogers, was faster than this one. And this one's only been going for 23 minutes. It looks like they finished. And perhaps we'll check that out for a couple of minutes after. So, well, Legion's bravely fighting on. And I think there must be several ways to finish. What's the quickest finish? Bishop at h5, take knight at f4, king g4, queen at g3, king f5. There is even another bishop for g6 if he wants. Or even queen g6, king e5, knight at d3. Oh, he doesn't have another knight for d3. Knight 2 d3 allows the king to escape by d5. There's also queen takes f6 check. King e4. Oh, is there any need to calculate? Chronatog saying king takes rook seems safer to me. It's a little late for safety now. Yeah, a little late for safety now. So CrazyHome is trying to find the fastest mate, I suppose. Or at least a guaranteed mate where he's not chasing the king all the way over to the queen side, which I was about to do before. I still think bishop at h5 and knight at f4. Unless knight at g3 is any faster, because it's on a more secure square. Knight at g3, king g4, queen at h5, king f4, and e3 is the only square you need to cover. You still have bishops and pawns. Oh, actually, pawn at e3 just mates. So knight at g3, queen at h5, and pawn at e3. The only other defense would be knight at g3, king g4, queen at... No, hang on, that's still the same. Yeah, that's it. This should be just mate in 3 after bishop at h5. Ah, king f5. Alright, we didn't see that one. So, still a bit of work to do. It doesn't really feel like work to me though, in this position. What's the most clinical finish? Bishop at d3, knight at e4 seems forced, otherwise queen at e4, queen at g4, king e5, and queen takes e4 to finish. So bishop at d3 seems like the fastest mate to me. Oh, actually there's just knight at g3 and queen at e4. So the key here is that the queen needs to be defended on e4. So drop the queen last, and either minor piece should work. Well, knight at g3. What if he comes back this way? King g5, queen at g6, king h4, and knight f5 check, and yeah, still knight at e4 this time. He's clearing the square. g3 for the queen. Oh, come on, come on. Literally anything mates, says Legion. Yeah, so mate in 1 no matter what. GG's. So that's the equalizer 1 game all for CrazyHome against LegionDestroyer. Yeah, so the turning point was where Legion just rushed this move. Where was it? Yeah, so g takes h6, allowing knight at g6 check. And with only a queen in hand, it's not the easiest defense. I wonder what happens if you stick the queen on e2. I mean, I suppose queen at e5, but then you don't have a diagonal for g2. I was just thinking rook takes, f takes, trying to come in this way. And then maybe a rook at f1. But then you got to watch out for moves like bishop takes g7 check, queen takes, queen landing back on d8 check. So any other easy defenses here? You could sidestep with the queen, queen f7, but I'm also a little bit skeptical of this defense allowing even pawn at e7, and you can't take it because then knight at g6 again. You'd have to sidestep with the king on e8. Perhaps white is running out of checks, but then you can't drop a bishop because then black can sack and then drop it straight back on g2 with mate. So yeah, maybe queen f7 works. A bit hard to tell. But perhaps instead of this whole bishop h3, it was better to just block up the e file, either knight e2 or bishop e2. Easy to say in hindsight, of course. So knight e2 with the idea of then g takes h6 and bishop at f3 to follow. It's perhaps a better way to do it. So shall we quickly just check out the match between G. Rogers and Chronatog? I'm not even sure of the result. How do we find Chronatog? Let's go back to the games. Chronatog the Eker, according to his notes. Simply an Eker. So game 1 looks like 28 moves, just taking Chronatog's perspective. It was e4, e5 with bishop e7. Early knight d5. c3, so white hasn't castled yet. Knight a5. Now that's interesting. You often see knight a5 to chase the bishop on c4, and then if white has already played c3, sometimes it comes back via b5, a4, c2. But this time it's got no way back, but it's a very unusual move, knight a5 in this position. So castle c6 is the idea, bishop b3, take bishop at h3, take a rook e1. Probably some move like pawn at g4 or blocking out the bishop on c1. Knight at g2, I was actually considering knight at g2. I didn't quite get the purpose after rook e2. But I suppose the knight will come back to h4. No? Bishop g4. I'd probably be brave and go king takes and king takes f3. Does it work after knight at h4 check? That is very scary. Maybe it doesn't work at all. Maybe that's why this was a quick game. King g3. Wow. Bishop takes f3, you would assume, and knight at h4 check. So you can't get away this way because of bishop g5. Oh, he's trying. Bishop g5 check. f4 forced to make room for the king. But now black should have enough play for the sacrifice material. King f2. Bishop takes h2. There's also a move queen g5 to consider. But yeah, bishop takes h2. The pawns here are very strong. Just stick them back on g3, g2. Maybe even f3 at some point, but not now. Knight f3 check, king f1, and just pawn at g2. Take. What is next? I suppose just rook at g1 check, win the queen. Yep. And the king is too wide open, so it should be an easy win for black. Take here f5, and yeah, all the lines are opening in black's favor. So he's resigned. There's a maiden one with queen at d1, but surely no defense with queen at g4, the main threat. So nice game, Chronatog, with a couple of sacrifices, and it turned out really well, the knight at g2. In the end, game number 2, we'll just quickly check it out. Again, maybe I'll just go back on the browser. That didn't work, it's still thinking. Here we go, Chronatog taking the white pieces. E4, E5, bishop C4, bishop C5. Early sack, the Vectorveld line it seems. Actually, that was a bishop E7, wasn't it? Pawn at D5. So bishop at D4 is an attempt to hold the pawn. There's also nothing wrong with just knight D4. Take D takes, and now all three bishops are open. Knight at D3. So what would I expect here? Maybe rook E8 or queen E8 or queen E7. Pawn at D6 is another move. I would have saved the pawn though for G4 or H3. Take, bishop at H4. Rook F8, typical bughouse move to just tuck the king back to G8. Hello, CrazyHome. It looked like you're a little bit lucky to get away with that second game, but nicely done with knight at F4 defending G2 and attacking at the same time. I wasn't sure at that point if there was any reasonable defense because black only had a queen in hand and he somehow had to block that e-file, and it was a lot easier when he had some other pieces as well as just the queen. So yeah, idea is to play the king back to G8 in this position. D4, so Chronatog's doing the right thing, but can black just take twice? So what's the idea after e takes? Because there is a knight at E2 fork in the end. So take, bishop at F5. The safest moves looks like pawn at G6, or maybe even just king back to G8. I wouldn't have taken that because it allows the pawn to creep closer and then you can stick the bishop back on E6. I suppose king G8 still should be safe enough. Bishop G5, bishop at G4. And you've got to be careful before you play a move like bishop at G4. And calculate bishop takes F6, bishop takes D1, bishop takes D8, etc. And I'm also not sure what happens if queen takes G4. Yeah, but you have to calculate all this very carefully. Bishop at E2 is a safer way to play because it gives white more options if he drops the queen back. There's an option just to play F3 or what else? Queen, I wouldn't go queen E6, pawn at F7. I'd just go F3. Yep, bishop takes F5. And, ooh, there's the advantage of the queen being on E2. So, triple attack here on F6. And a big threat looks like to take once and then replace a knight on H6. Knight at D5, so giving the queen, hoping to take back with a knight and then a rook, so that way white doesn't get this knight at H6 check. So probably just take the queen and take the knight first, fair enough. Rook takes, bishop takes queen. And always got to be careful of a queen landing on the back row. Can't see a force mate just here, but it's very close. Bishop at E3, well, it's a good move if it works. I guess just king H1. Rook takes bishop. Alright, so what to do with a knight and a queen in hand? You could pick up the rook anytime. I can't see anything wrong with this. No, knight D2. What's the idea? He just wants to play knight E4 and bring another piece to F6. And what happened on bishop takes F6? Even had a crazy idea to take on F6 and then to go queen sack on E3 and then knight at H6. It looked okay because I didn't see a direct counterattack. Anyway, couldn't be 100% sure whether that worked. Knight at F4. So just trying to predict the next move without looking. I know it's on the screen, but I'm trying to focus on the board and not look at the moves. So yeah, black is threatening pawn on H3, so white has to be a bit careful. So if you want to attack quickly, it probably has to be bishop takes F6. And queen C4 is a pin, but it's very slow. It doesn't seem to threaten anything after knight at E7, king H8. Yeah, because even though a knight is potentially useful, black has already played pawn at h3. So, well, queen c4 is played. I'm just wondering what happens after pawn at h3. A knight at e7, I saw this, but then I can't see what's wrong with king h8. And then with a big threat to mate on g2. Alright, so, I mean, to my eyes, this looks good for black. I can't actually see any way for white to immediately come back into the game. What am I missing? Knight at e7, king h8, I still don't see. Queen at g3 defending, so black is giving back the queen. Takes there, takes there. Pawn at h3 is even better than having a knight stuck on g2 in the way. Oh, hang on, what's this? Does that really work? Huh. It'd be a miracle save if it did work. So, bishop takes f6 check. So the idea is if knight takes, then there's a rook at f7. King can't step back because then pawn at g7 to finish. If king goes this way, well, at the very least there's picking up all the bishops with knight f5 or rook f6 check. So what about king takes f6? It is a legal move, but it does allow knight takes d5 check. Knight takes d5. Is that too much to bear? Yeah, but I think you will have to do it. Let's see what happens. King takes f6. Knight takes. Oh, not pawn takes. I thought knight takes was better to cover some squares, which are only covered by the king at the moment. So, and if a queen's sacked, then you get the first check here. So that may make a difference. Let's see. C takes d5 was played in the game. Knight at e4 check, attempting to open this diagonal for the queen to defend the rook on f7. So king steps back. It seems reasonable at first. Pawn at f6 check. So my first thought is, what's wrong with king g6, rook at g5, king h6? And because white doesn't have a bishop on g7 or a knight for f7, I can't see what's wrong with this. But let's continue. The move in the game was king g8. I mean, of course, white can pick up another pawn with check if he's desperate, if it mates. So rook at g7, king h8, I guess, is G. Rogers' idea. But what happened in the game? Rook at g3 is the better way to defend, because it still gives access to some various pieces on the 7th rank, depending on which way the king goes or how he blocks. So bishop at g6 was the move in the game. Still threatening pawn at g2. And I can't see how black is not winning this, although I see on the result on the left is that checkmate white is victorious. I can't see at the moment how it's happening. f7 check, king takes f7, knight g5 check, king g7, okay, knight takes h3. Alright, was there any way to avoid this? Could black step another way? What about king f8? But in that case there is pawn at e7 check, and if king takes, queen takes c7 check. Let's say pawn at d7. And white has another pawn for f6. So I suppose you're still getting in the move knight g5 with check anyway. Not sure if that really makes a difference. Okay, knight g5, knight takes h3. And if bishop takes h3, black can also play for material, which is d takes c4. And look at the time these players have on their clocks. 5 minutes and 6 minutes 50. Wow. D takes c4, so black is playing for material. Knight takes f4. So perhaps don't take this back because of knight at h5 check. Perhaps there's a better way to cover the square h5, or to block out the g file somehow. was thinking about even starting with pawn at g2 and then something landing on h3 like bishop at h3. So bishop takes f4, knight at h5. I just feel like this keeps the white king a lot safer than it could have been in with the other options. King f7, knight takes f4. So still only two pawns and a bishop. I'm struggling to see how white won this. No threats at all that I can see. So what would be my first thought? Something like bishop at e5 or bishop at e3? Bishop at e3 looks good. No, bishop at e5, still pretty decent move. Pawn at e6 check. Just take everything. Take, okay. Yeah, and I think taking there is necessary. There's no direct attack. Although bishop takes g3 may be possible. I think there's no reason why not just take on e6. Yep. I was also looking at bishop at h3 check for safety. King takes d5, bishop at e4 check. Probably just step back this way, or I was even looking at king c5. But then b4 could be a tricky way to open the b file en passant. Knight takes b3 check. King b6 and king a6 is what I'm looking at. With only pawns in hand, it should be okay. Anyway, this feels a little bit safer. So king c6, and if bishop on first, then step back to d7. Looks very safe for black. If this way, of course, you've got to be a bit more careful. Yeah, maybe king c5 in this case. But still, b4 does look dangerous. King c5, b4. Now, do you go en passant or do you take with the king? Because you can't allow knight takes c4 check, so I wouldn't step back this way. And at some point, I'm guessing there'll be a point of no turning back where there's a forced mate for white. I'm not sure yet whether we've reached that point. So I'm still looking at king takes b4 as the first candidate move, because any check on the b file, ooh, well, maybe you can't block on b3 because this rook is open as well as the rook on b1. So the rooks will just take twice. If king a4, there's a bishop at a5 and a knight c4 to finish. So, okay, we could have even reached the point of no turning back. Let's look at en passant. Knight takes b3 check. King b4. Pawn and a bishop in hand. Bishop at a4. a5 check. King a4. Maybe that's the sequence, because then to proceed, white will have to throw away a lot of pieces. And d takes c5. So looking at c takes b3 en passant, knight takes b3 and king b4. There's also a3 check, king a4, but that looks survivable, at least in the short term. Let's see the move in the game. It was king takes b4. I didn't like that because of rook or ab1 or even rook fb1 check. That's it, rook fb1 check. And this may already be game over. So the only move seems to be king c5, because otherwise it's a mating net with knight takes c4 and bishop at b5, or the other way around. So I thought king c5 was the only possible move to allow bishop at a3, blocker, bishop takes b4 check. King b6, it still may be a mate after knight takes c4. King a6, pawn here. Check, king takes a4, king c4, takes c4, and bishop at d3. Yeah, that's it. So I think c takes b3 en passant. Although some people say if you see an en passant, you have to play it. I think that may have been the losing move. But let's see the finish. Rook b takes b3, doesn't matter I think which way he takes first. Rook takes b3 check, knight c4 and pawn at b5 check. So a really nice turnaround there from Chronatog. Good game to study if you're interested in long king chases and finding ways to defend long sequences of checks with king walks. And I have no idea, I have not analysed this game before, so I have no idea whether any of what I said made any sense at all, but it was just interesting. Perhaps if you're not on board 1, if you're on boards 2 to 6, just to see how somebody may analyze just throwing out the first move that comes to their head and following sequences of checks and trying to find a safe place to hide for the king. So that was a lot of fun to analyze. Well done, Chronatog. So took the match 2-0. And just to finish before I go to bed, we will take a quick look at the current standings. So just switching over to the browser display and going up to the top. So my team Neil before Zod is, I believe, 1 game all against the Giant Slayers. So if you haven't caught my previous streams, I was an alternate for GSVC and played in rounds 3 and 4. So this is now round 5, the final round, and GSVC has returned to take on Rapid Variance. That will be held on Tuesday at 2 p.m. UTC. Monday 2 p.m, which is Tuesday 1 a.m. Sydney time. And current score between the Rook and Rollers and the Smooth Smotherers is... Actually, there's a third game. I didn't realize there was a third match going on board 6 between Polylogarithmic and Kuatio. And looks like a 1-0 to Kuatio. So 2-1 at the moment to the Smotherers. And a big lead 5-1 to Recovering Buggers over Hazy House. So LegionDestroyer going 1-all with CrazyHome. Darkness 2-0, that was the first match played in round 5 against OK. And Chronatog taking this match here 2-0 over G Rogers. So I'll take a break for now. And the next match I will cover, actually, I have arranged a match on Pie Chess, and that is with Jal Carlander. That'll be at midnight UTC on Saturday night, which is in about 9 hours time, I think, 9 hours time. So we'll be playing some variants, like perhaps Crazyhouse 960. If you haven't seen that before, it'll be good to catch the stream if you're available. I'll be streaming and commentating. Possibly throw in a few games of Capablanca House and S House or Serawan House, which combines the variants of Capablanca chess and S chess with Crazy House. So you get to replace the pieces like the hawk and the elephant. That's always a lot of fun to try out those new variants. So thanks for watching. I'll post on YouTube if you missed the stream, and we'll see you soon.